What does it take for us to build workplaces and a world that is fit for the future? A question that plagues many a leader and many an organization. How do we learn from our experiences? Are we shaping ourselves and our workplaces to be fit for the future? What does it take to invest in people and nurture success? How do we ensure that our investments in diversity, equity, and inclusion are delivering to the intended goals? Are we seeing the very invisible responsibility that most employees carry, that of being caregivers? What does it take to build a caregiver friendly workplace? Are leaders caregivers? What can leaders and organizations learn from caregivers and their experiences? How do we create safe spaces that enable inclusion? Is this something that is holding, especially women, back from the C suite? We are delighted to bring to you a series of conversations around the idea of building future fit corporates. Who is a global leader in diversity, equity, and inclusion? Welcome, Meghna.
Thank you, Bhavana. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure indeed to be part of this journey with you. And glad we could have this conversation today.
I'm very excited about exchanging thoughts with you right now on this platform, although you and I have had multiple conversations. So it's time that we share it with everyone. And for that, it will be very valuable if I share a little about you. With over a decade dedicated to spearheading talent strategy and change initiatives across numerous geographies globally, Meghna thrives in leveraging diverse learning methodologies and data analytics to empower workforce capabilities and catalyze workplace transformation. That's a lot of words, Meghna. Her passion lies in championing awareness and appreciation for the multifaceted dimensions of representation within organizations. She is deeply committed to fostering inclusive, collaborative workplaces. And we will discover that through this conversation. Through coaching leaders and steering DI allyship strategies, she actively drives. Don't do that. Keep it. Sorry.
It's okay. I think
The
we
last
can
part.
pause the introduction there. It's okay. It's a
No,
very long one.
it's fine. I would rather have it. I'll repeat this. Okay.
Yeah.
Her passion lies in championing awareness and appreciation for the multifaceted dimensions of representation within organizations. She is deeply committed to fostering inclusive, collaborative workplaces and has great insights there, which I am looking forward to unfold. Through coaching leaders and steering DEI allyship strategies, she actively drives organizational change. Megha harnesses the power of storytelling through coaching, empowering individuals, groups, and organizations to leverage their unique narratives for inspiration, motivation, and transformative outcomes.
Thank
Welcome,
you for that.
Meghna.
Thank you so much, Bhavana, for having me.
The
And
platform
thank you
is
for the
open for
introduction.
you to first start off with how do you relate with the idea of caregivers, caregiving, and caregiver sati?
Um, I think while many of us are catching up with it, I had the privilege of running into you many years ago, and therefore be very well informed of the term. I guess in our capacities, we are all caregivers. It's the realization of that persona and identity that a lot of us haven't come to yet. And I guess one of our initial conversations, some 7, 8 years back, just made me realize that even back then, there was a version of a caregiver in me, and that there is a version of a caregiver in everyone. The beauty of it is that while each of us are caregivers in the capacity, that particular persona itself is evolving. The intensity and magnitude of your caregiving responsibilities keep evolving over time, and I guess the need to have this conversation at every life stage, therefore, is very important. At early stages, at mid careers, or midlife crisis, as one would call it, and then even to think of it, what does it mean for as we grow older, and start becoming part of the silver economy or the elders ourselves, right? So the spectrum of caregiving, very beautifully shared with you for so many years, uh, is is widespread, is omnipresent, and really needs a lot more deliberate attention. So yeah, I guess one of my endeavors in all these years has been to think of caregivers as a persona when we think of employees and talent. We think of a lot of things when we're looking at talent. How do we make them more productive? How do we foster a culture that makes them more brings them more psychological safety, makes them feel that this is a place where they can be their true selves and feel belonged. I guess a large part of that journey gets missed out if you don't factor in that they're all caregivers at some point in time, and that their intensity of caregiving responsibilities evolve. And this, by virtue, is a very dynamic space. Not It has direct correlation with what you're going in your personal space, but it also has a lot to factor in when you think of these ecosystem, the macroeconomic situations, right? We are seeing high rates of inflation across the globe. How does that really impact caregiving responsibilities? And what does it do to people who are part of the larger workforce and to whom we promise meaningful careers? So I guess it's a large intersection, one that is hidden, but also one that needs a lot more talking about. So I'm glad that you are on this journey, Bhavna. I've always been very inspired by the brave stance you had taken so many years ago. And I do remember one of our conversations saying that it does not always take a personal story. However, we come to realize that everyone has some personal story to develop on when you think about caregiving. Yeah.
So true. I find your take and your experience on diversity, equity, inclusion very thought provoking. And what I'd like for you to comment on is that we started this series of conversations around Women's Day. And we have seen over the years that Women's Day, which is 8th March, has changed shape significantly. Of course, we could, the cynic in us could say that it's not enough. But I think in my life time, from being nothing at all to being an important day where roses were handed out to the women colleagues and spa vouchers, to getting messages from men colleagues saying Happy Women's Day, and me not knowing what to do with it, we seem to have come to a place where organizations have extended it to the month.
Right.
And my dream or ambition is to have these conversations through the year. So we are at middle of the year, way beyond March. I'm asking you to trace your understanding of inclusion in workplaces and the journey that most organizations have taken vis-a-vis gender inclusion and women in particular. So we've invested a lot believing that this is a significant thing to do. We've had significant successes as well. So can you help us trace that, and where could we go from here?
Yeah, I do want to start by sharing that it's a very important conversation even now.
Yeah.
And while we have made significant uh, progress, there's a lot that needs to be still done,
Yes.
right? And it's ironic because it's a conversation that feels like time immemorial itself. It's been I think it's been 2 decades that I Possibly I'm witnessing the conversation in a different form, but I'm glad that conversations are evolving. So
Mm.
that's some gratitude there. That's
Yeah.
acknowledgement that there's progress, and then
Yeah.
there's also the realization that conversations can move
Yeah.
the needle, can truly move the
Yeah.
needle.
Yeah. Yeah.
However repetitive they feel, there
Mm.
is immense power in that socialization,
Mm.
in being able to amplify awareness
Yeah.
and being able to um, share that story, right? So therefore, to the example that you started with, I it may feel that Women's Day is is a tad bit overdone, right? Or there's part of it that makes you cringe. Uh,
Yeah.
and there's a part of me that would want to say that I'm happy at least that we are doing this, but uh,
Yeah.
it's not the best milestone for our own self, right? That we are at least doing this and we are at least doing that. And we are better off where we were before. Uh, in all fairness, there's a lot more
Yeah.
that needs attention. And it's this, and I think it's this place of realization. I'm a big believer through all these years of my practice that an informed ally is an active ally, right? You really cannot get onto doing something unless you are aware of what you're dealing with. You're
Right.
aware of uh, the theme itself. You're aware of its challenges. You're true and honest to what can be done and prioritize that, right? Something can be done right away versus there are some quick wins. Some of them have longer gestation, uh, and this awareness is extremely important. I think it's this one particular piece that makes or breaks the journey of inclusion for most organizations or workplaces. This ability to harness or gauge where you truly stand is what makes some of the more aspirational uh, organizations the place to be, because what they have proven over a period in time is consistency, the ability to consistently go back to their current state and 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 recalibrate what the need of the hour is. And to that, when we think of what we have done for not just inclusion but also gender inclusion and specifically for women inclusion, one of the examples that has been a huge learning for me is the whole piece around returning women and women on career break, right?
Right.
And having done this for multiple organizations, I've realized that while the talent has similar challenges, if not the same, the organizations have a plethora of challenges, multiple
Right.
permutations that you can think of.
Right.
And do you go into this with the commitment that you know it all and that you can solve for it? No. You get
Mm.
into it knowing that you're here to make an impact. There's
Mm.
someone out there who possibly needs that flexibility and accommodation. There's also not there's also this whole commitment to upholding meritocracy and giving a fair, equal opportunity to everyone who walks in through the doors, right? But at the same point in time, am I doing it because everyone is doing it because it's fashionable, or is it something that I really need or believe in? And
Mm.
it's this aspect of being able to um, stay honest that this is fashionable, perhaps not for us as an organization, is where organizations start letting down their commitment, right? They embark on this journey and they come to the realization it's not my cup of tea, having been told so multiple times over, and then abruptly move away from that commitment. And there's nothing worse than abruptly moving away from a commitment, right?
Mm.
And I think I may come across very strongly on that. While iteration is an important process, what it does, it goes back to challenging fundamentals. People who were on this journey with you start questioning the integrity and authenticity of proposals and plans and
Mm.
purpose, right?
Can I just rephrase what you just said, which is
Sure,
that
sure.
let's just take an example of women returning to work, and if they do return to work, if an organization hasn't really thought through that this is a program that we want to run, then sometimes what can happen is the unanticipated challenges within the organization can throw the program out of gear, and that has huge unintended consequences because then people stop believing your
Correct.
initiatives. Yeah.
Yeah,
And you
yeah,
do want believers because you're embarking on new experiments. But then,
yeah.
yeah,
And
so that's the
and to
key
that,
word.
yeah, and I think what's also important is while there are going to be unexpected challenges, no failure is too big to mull over. I think the idea that's set up in the mind that we will only do something when there's 100% success. I mean, how can we really gauge that?
Yeah.
And the possibility of failing is 50%. It's okay. I mean, to fail fast, fail forward is perhaps how we should be looking into getting into such commitments. And that's where most of the inclusion initiatives, intents, interventions are tested. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah,
No, I hear you. And I think there is huge value to experimenting, and there is great value to failing, or what is termed as failing, or let's say the first round of attempting something. What I'd like for you to emphasize on the basis of your experience is that you spoke about there is much to be done vis-a-vis gender inclusion at the workplace. So
correct.
let's just say that we have taken a set of initiatives so far. What, according to you, have been some of the best practices, some of the things that you're very fond of that are being done a little more than before? Let's just first take that.
Oh, I'm glad you asked that. I think one of the things that has radically changed
Hmm.
over the last decade or so is being able to double click on the problem at hand, right?
Mm-hmm.
So previously it was a gender thing where there's
Mm-hmm.
only men and women, pretty
Mm-hmm.
binary. It transitioned to very holistically embracing that the world does not thrive in the binary, and therefore what's the range like, what's the spectrum like, right? It then moved on to looking at people uh, with their abilities and how and what is really required as an ecosystem to bring out the best in productivity, right? Not like while everyone doesn't look and feel and think the same, what is it that they need to be their best version? uh,
Mm.
and and then from there, I feel that there is a lot more thought put into some of the underlying nuances that don't that the intersectionalities, right, that don't really come out in absolutes but are there. It's this cognizance of that I could be a woman, I could be someone who has relocated, I could be someone who has imposter syndrome, I'm someone who's probably a caregiver, I'm someone who's probably a mother. I think the ability to now think of Meghna as someone who's beyond just a woman in the room, a woman in leadership, uh, and uh, this nationality and all of that, right? So I think there is now a more robust, more open conversation about multiple personas and multiple identities and how each one of us are that, and also many things as we move along.
Mm.
Uh, uh, so I am someone who loves looking at the data, and I'm always very wary when people get into surveys or benchmarking practices, especially the ones that are 9 months, 12 months long. Uh, even when I'm doing the proposals, I'm thinking this is going to get stale. I mean, by the time I get to implementing, the woman would have been promoted. I would have lost a few more people in this process. They are probably not going to be single parents anymore, new parents anymore. They're probably going to be someone who are no longer in the system, but a relocation or an expat. But yeah, right. And uh, this ability to think of time frame when we are looking at anything that we're implementing is now going to be crucial for us. So while there is awareness that there are um, conscious as well as hidden intersectionalities, um, it's also going to be important to provision and be prepared for things that keep evolving, right? So I think that is exciting. It's exciting. There is a part of me that also is very sad to see the radical polarization of thoughts. Right, with the awareness, you would expect people to have more empathy, and on the contrary, I feel there are pockets, emerging pockets now, which feel very polarized. So there is that challenge as well.
With respect to gender, you see the polarization with respect to gender.
I see the polarization with respect to thoughts, right?
Hmm.
I think the, so. If you look at a few years back, many years back rather, um, there was no people used to not acknowledge that there's a woman in the room. They used
Right,
to not acknowledge that it's a problem that there's no woman in the room,
right.
right? To a point where there's too much of acknowledgement, too many conversations around it, and and I think sometimes they tend to um, flow in directions which are also rather regressive, right?
Right.
So you go back to asking yourself that did all this awareness really bring any positive change, or people are going back to speaking more vocally or expressing more raw thoughts um, that were anyway there before and still are now, but at a much larger scale, a much more glamorized version of it, right? So yeah, but there,
So let's break this down, or let's
yeah,
unpack this, because clearly, like you're seeing multiple things at the same time, and not all of us can see everything that you're seeing. To just break it down, Meghna, there are definitely, what you're saying is that organizations seem to have made some progress vis-a-vis gender inclusion, and it has gone beyond women at the workplace. There are some things that are going well, though of course there are some unintended consequences as well. Having said that, you mentioned some time ago, we've come a long way, but we are still very far from our destination.
yeah.
So, first, let's define what is a good goalpost. Forget the destination. What is the next goalpost that we are aiming for?
In my humble opinion, I think the next, the aspirational place to be would be where things are not over engineered, right? Um, do I know how we will get there? No, not yet. I'm
Yeah,
yeah,
right now,
yeah,
just goalpost.
yeah. But if you think about a reflection, right, of
Yeah,
why are we striving so hard to have women at workplace,
right.
right? And you go back to the early the starting end of this rope, you will realize it's only because we wanted to over engineer this, right?
Mhm.
We over engineered societal norms, we over engineered opportunities, right? And people had legitimate reasons. I'm probably not questioning that. But if you take the pipeline out, you will realize in your own family setup, there's a fair representation of men and women at every age group, at every family unit, right?
Hmm.
It's only when we start moving this particular sample group to, let's say, education, early careers, is where we start seeing the number dipping. Fair. So, and then you have this entire setup and team and a committed workforce that looks at re-engineering and having more women at workplace. So I feel that's one aspect which would be like the utopian state where we don't have to over engineer. And the other thing is our ability to proactively provision for all sorts of life stage events, right? I I don't want people to think of, okay, if we have so many women, this is going to be the cost. If they go on maternity, this is going to be the cost. When they come back from maternity, this is going to be the cost. I mean, it's a choice, but yeah, it's also a natural progression of life that if you have someone who's a woman, there is and at that life stage, there's a possibility that they'll go on a family leave, and there's a possibility that there'll be more sick leaves being availed, and there's a possibility that they would need a little more flexibility. But who wouldn't need that? And um, would you want to really draft your narrative by glorifying that you're making these possibilities, or shouldn't this be there for every human being who is a very important part of your workforce, right? Because on the other end, what we really miss out is that there's a possibility that your male colleague needs a little more flexibility. There's a possibility that your male colleague probably has to cater to something in the morning and then log in a little late. And we get, we always have this conversation at the cost of someone else. And
Yeah.
that's probably the utopian state, right? I want to have these conversations, of course, being very true to the business cost, but not at the cost of another person or another identity. Um, so again, if you think of women planning for their family or maternity, right? Um, is that it? Is there nothing else uh, uh, that defines them? Of course, there is. There are probably leaders, right, who have large teams, large book sizes and responsibilities. They are probably caregivers themselves, right? They are someone who are maybe a mother for a first time, or probably um, have had experienced a journey before it's their second child, third child, you know. And can we really gauge what their expectations are going to be? Are we really going to walk up to that person and say, you've done this before, it's going to be slightly easier for you? Maybe it's not going to be easy for them. Or perhaps it was easy the first time around. Why do we have to really have so many um, uh, sentiments attached? Why can't it be a place
I
where
think
I am able to
I
make a
hear your
decision?
passion. I hear your passion for this topic. And, let's go to the basics because we are going to probably trigger some conversation in the minds of people that are listening to us. Inclusion. Okay. Why must workplaces include all kinds of people? Why can't I just be smart about it? Why can't I just pick the most performing lot at that point in time? Because there was a philosophy around high performing team members, right? Take the top few that are high performing individuals, right? And those that are not performing right now, why should I worry about um, that pool of people? Why can't I just keep acing performance?
I think the answer is in your statement itself, right? Uh, what is performance? Isn't it a relative term? Isn't it something that's um, for a given time frame, and that doesn't define you pre and post that performance period? Um, I mean, in all fairness, there are organizations that look at talent density. I'm not going to name, but there are many famous leaders who have extremely curt about and very direct about the fact that if you don't meet a certain performance standard, this is perhaps not the place for you. And there is maybe some thought around it, right? It
Yeah.
doesn't do great to your mental health.
Yeah.
They're extremely good about how you want to, how and when you decide when you want to part ways. And in my mind, maybe that's fair, because we are here to do business at the end of the day. If the
Right.
business model is a model that really needs you to deliver and turn around things a certain way, let's not shy away from it. Let's be honest that this is not my cup of tea, because we would expect the organization to also have certain accommodations on our behalf.
Right.
But why do we really need people of all walks and all in all forms and all shape around us? Because that's the reality. We are supposed to be a microcosm of the ecosystem in which we operate. And anything less than that is an over engineered space. People start looking homogeneous, people start thinking homogeneous, um, and it's not sustainable. It goes back to hurting the business that you are trying to drive at the end of the day.
But
Uh,
that's in contradiction with, for example, all the management speak that is usually done, all the leaders speak of saying, let's have a vision, let's have an aligned mission, let's have goals that everybody is aligned to. Now, on one hand, you're putting in so much energy to cross the t's and dot the i's, or get the ducks in a row, so to speak, and go after competition or whatever, even if it's a white space. You're going doing that. And on the other hand, leaders like you are suggesting, let's get people from all walks of life, people who think differently, who've had different experiences. Oh my God, it's like it's like herding cats. um,
okay. Oh, I will start with what you just said. Um, People actually always all think differently,
okay.
right? Um, it's how you groom them to start thinking in alignment.
Okay.
Fair. Um, and when we say alignment, as an organization, the culture or the fabric of the organization or the weave on which we want to paint, or the and all of that, um, it's where it's a north star. We want to go somewhere, right? This again, it can't be a herd without direction,
Right.
right? So it's the what we want to achieve, and it's also being respectful of how we do it,
Right.
right? Where inclusion fits in is it's the who
Okay.
aspect of it. And
Right.
I don't think progressive organizations want to change the who part of it.
Mm-hmm.
We value who you are as you are. We are here aligned to get to doing something, right? First of all, there needs to be some kind of mechanism that calls out unruly behavior or the outliers, as we call it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where you have the how. I'm really
Mm-hmm.
good at something, but I will burn the whole village while I get there. It's not really helping, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we are all good at something, but none of us can come together and you know uh,
Mm-hmm.
uh, deliver on the ultimate bottom line. That's also not good. But the what and the how does not um, dictate who you're supposed to be. I think what we as individuals have started doing is not being able to differentiate this, right? So, like I said, when you go trekking, you're at the edge of the cliff,
Yeah.
and there's a railing. It's not to tell you that we limit you to go there. It's just a cautioning you that this is where one would ideally stop, but you can go ahead. It's upon you. If you are the person who seeks that rush and adrenaline, jump off. uh, and if you're someone who was looking for a bit of guidance as to where where is a good and healthy point, then we are just we are doing our best. Do again, I come with the humble submission that we don't know it all, we haven't done it all right. We are always constantly figuring out what next. But I do want to put some of the onus back on individuals and let them know that it's so easy to go back and criticize the system. It's very difficult to identify your role, your influence, and your ability to drive change.
Yeah.
And it's been a large part of my journey where I give a lot of the power and ownership back to people, help them realize that they have a very important role to play. Um, yeah,
I understand, and we will get to the point of the role that individuals can play in terms of owning their power and creating inclusive places around themselves. But I'd like to continue with that theme of saying that a lot has been done in terms of ensuring that there is a steady pipeline. There was a time when most organizations would rue the fact that there just aren't enough women in colleges. There just
right,
aren't enough women in engineering colleges for organizations that needed to hire women with an engineering background, for example. And some of that has changed. Not significantly, but it has definitely changed. Now, let's just say that there is a better pipeline and organizations are doing something else. There is a biological requirement around marriage and maternity, social requirement, which also causes women to deprioritize career for a variety of reasons. But then organizations and everybody has done a lot of work to say, listen, this should not necessarily come in your way. We will work with you for you to be back, right?
right.
And we are still seeing that women participation in the formal uh, labor workforce is dropping,
Right.
right? So my guess is that we wanted to build the pipeline so that many more women can be leaders in organizations and make strategic decisions, so that we can build the culture, so that we can have different kind of workplaces. There can be diversity of thought where it really matters,
Right.
right? But a large number of this pipeline that we have brought in is going through a leaky pipeline,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I'd like for you to visualize and tell us what is perhaps going on, that there is leaky pipelines, and what can we do so that more women can reach leadership positions in large organizations, so that inclusion can truly begin to manifest.
One of the things that I guess needs looking into
Hmm.
is what are some of the reasons of the leakage, as you
Right,
said, right? I I think they have changed
right.
by and large. They probably are no longer uh, only rooted in socio-cultural challenges,
Hmm.
but perhaps could also, I mean, the data could reflect that there's a little more of personal choice that has kicked in. And an example very close to me here would be, I think there are more and more women who feel empowered now
Hmm. Hmm.
to, while they reach a certain stage in their career, to think of a career beyond the corporate setup. So
Right,
while I am losing them within the corporate framework, I
right.
am still being able to add more women role models and leaders, thought leaders, fine, out there, like yourself, Bhavna. It's truly uh, inspirational that you decided to take the stance yourself a few years back. But have we lost you as a leader? I don't think that. So, this is one. The other thing is, again, macroeconomic situations and how we operate now. The path to progression no longer is only let me be here and let me get retired. And
Mm,
when I am, you need so many people at that level with that generational diversity. That's no longer uh, what the picture looks like, right?
mhm.
I think there are equal number of men and women and everyone who decide that they want to pursue a corporate career only up to such a point, right? And they want, I know one of my male colleagues who decided to drop off at a senior level and wanted to support and open up a crash.
Mm,
And I think people are now um, more courageous and bold of pursuing personal passions and calling, be
right.
it travel, be it anything, be it social change. Um, and I would rather have that
Mm,
than have a number, than have that woman be with me, be in absolute misery, not being able to fulfill their purpose, and just have that number on my dashboard saying that, oh, I have a woman in my team. One of my earlier organizations, um, brilliant representation, and at across the level. And now when I look back, I realize why they were leaders at such an early stage, because
mm,
they knew what they wanted to pursue and how they want to give back to the
mm,
practice, to the community. Um, and that's important. That's important. And diversity and inclusion largely is also being able to hold your identity, true identity. Uh, some of and therefore have thought leadership. And sometimes I don't think it's about having men and women in the room. It's about being able to have that healthy, diverse thought leadership, very respectful conversations, and the ability to disagree with respect is probably a true matrix or a true way to assess how inclusive that particular workplace is. Um, some of my most supportive sponsors and mentors are men. So I really can't imagine how it would have been if they were not having that broad lens on them to think of the broader spectrum. So, do we really always need women to solve for women? No, I think we need everyone to solve for everyone. And that's probably the narrative I'm trying to bring forward, that we make this a very binary, very specific conversation. I think what we really want to do is make sure that you unlock every potential of yourself, and that you're also equally willing and open to do that for someone else. And that is my aspirational state. That is what inclusion looks like, should look like. And it's actually very easy to do. It's so easy to do that you don't need people like us. The conversation is done if without a Meghna and a Bhavana in the room. Unfortunately, there's a lot of uh, rigmarole around it. Yeah.
well, you did say a lot. And, my God, I wish I could double click on so many things that we went through. The one thing that stood out for me, Meghna, was that perhaps the metric that an organization needs to pursue is not just how many women at various levels in the organization. It might be a very interesting metric to follow through in terms of women or men or people that left the organization, the roles they were playing after the organization,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
right? Maybe as an ESG metric of saying, this is our contribution. And I know one organization which had once, when I was spoke about this organization provides entrepreneurs to the world.
Yeah. Yeah. I can totally relate to that, right? Because I have seen in the recent years some of
Yeah,
the independent consultants and thought leaders being largely from a particular pedigree of organizations. And I think though those organizations are bold and brave enough to invest in the person, in their
yeah,
career, and the larger social purpose than just
yeah,
thinking of the the hard lines around us, right? So,
yeah.
yeah, yeah,
No, that's a fascinating thought, and I have found that in social development organizations, usually the measure of impact is way beyond the organization. You would
absolutely.
measure impact by saying that, listen, it's not just what we are doing, but it is the ecosystem that we are creating, and by that extension, what are we, how are we contributing to the larger setup? It's a good thing to kind of track. So it would be a good thing to track what men and women are doing. And I would like to take your perspective on, so let's say one of our hypotheses has been that women tend to leave not just for personal passion or choice, but sometimes for caregiving responsibilities. And now, with the changing demographic, this is going to be an ask, not just of women, but men of a certain age group. And caregiving in the long term can be very stressful. So it will lead to loss of productivity or attrition. I would like for you to comment on the implications of caregiving both for men and women.
Right. Again, it's not binary. We really don't know who needs it at what stage. But caregiving, like I said at the very onset, is is an omnipresent um, persona, and while you may have the privilege or luxury at some point to ignore it, there will come a point where you need to probably prioritize it a little higher than you currently do.
Right.
And therefore, it's imperative for organizations to try and understand what is it about caregiving and the complex framework around it, or the sheer complexity of it, that they need to start being mindful of. Perhaps there's
Hmm.
something that there are aspects of it that they are looking into through flexibility, through hybrid working, but there is also a need to accept that we don't know it all,
Hmm.
and there's a need to realize that you need to work with partners, committed partners who deal with the problem at grassroots level, and who can really bring the true challenges into picture. Again, unless you don't know what you're dealing with, you will not be able to solve for it, and we may not have the expertise and perhaps the bandwidth to do an in-depth research and understanding, right? So being able to partner, not just for this, but in my experience, in everything that you look at in terms of underrepresented groups, it's very important to tie up with the right partner, have that thought leadership, understand not just the market and the benchmark, but also the real grassroots level challenges, and then perhaps take a very honest call what you want to start with, where do you want to start integrating, and who do you want to be. Do you want to be that organization that is able to give it all, or that you decide that this is the most we can do, and it's okay to live with that, in the present. Maybe come back to it committing that you will revisit this commitment in a few months or a few years time. But I feel a platform like Caregiver Sathi and your peers, right, brings so much more knowledge to the breadth and the depth of the challenge in front of us. The and I guess even you are learning and exploring something new every time you get into this. But the ecosystem to support each other in the learning journey, and to use one's strength and resources to amplify the change, positive change, is very important, absolutely crucial. If we think we can do it alone, we are setting ourselves, we're designed to fail in that format. So it's a win-win when everyone comes together and does what they can best. Yeah.
Well, as always, conversations with you are enriching, enlightening. I have enjoyed this conversation. I could go on and on, and I think we should continue with the many other questions I have for you, and maybe that's for the next edition. Um,
Sure.
and I'd like to thank you for your time, but I'd also like for you to, you know, look back at this conversation and maybe give us some closing remarks as we bring this conversation today to an end.
I'm deeply grateful for the opportunity to come and share my thoughts. While it's limited to my experiences and my learning, I'm sure there's someone out there who will resonate or probably come back and share a different view. We are all open to that. And I can only look internally inward and know that my role as a caregiver has evolved over all these years, and it has made me a lot more aware, a lot more empathetic, um, and accepting of who I am. And I hope all of us give ourselves that moment to reflect and embrace where we are in our life stage. And more power to you, Bhavna. Thank you so much for doing this for so many who don't have the liberty to embark on this. And happy to support in any way possible. Yeah.
Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you for your time. For starters, I'm looking forward to many more partnerships and collaborations, and
Yes.
for many others to be inspired by this conversation and consider building a workplace that's caregiver friendly.